Have you ever wanted to lock your in a cage and not masturbate or have sex for an entire month? I am sure most of you would not agree to this self-initiated challenge. However, are you aware of the benefits?
Welcome to Swinger University. I'm Phoebe.
And I'm Ed.
Join us as we explore the exciting world of ethical non-monogamy, sexual health, and sex education with an intellectual and sexy twist. What is LOCKtober? It is a 1 month of volunteered abstinence, and it is a male chastity device.
It could also be imposed by a dom in a dom-sub relationship.
Well, it's October, and this is what we're doing this year.
Time to put it away.
And you may not know if it's going to be for 2 weeks, a day, or 30 days.
Right.
The purpose of LOCKtober is to reset that sexual appetite, to maybe gain better understanding of your body and what you want from sex. It can also be very rewarding. We are going to interview one of our favorite guests, and he has actually participated in LOCKtober for the full 30 days. And in fact, I think it's even been longer than 30 days. And so we are going to introduce him now. He's going to go by Mr. Red. He is the author of many erotic stories at Red Hot Red Erotica. If you haven't been to his website, you absolutely should go and read some of these fabulous, sexy stories. In fact, we read some of those for our patrons. So if you want to hear them, please go and check those out. He has been in a long-term marriage with Ms. Red. My first question to Mr. Red is going to be, how many years have you been doing this?
Oh, well, first of all, I'd like to say big thanks to you guys for having me. Appreciate it. This is a kink that started quite some time ago. We've been married a long time. And it really wasn't until the days of Tumblr that I think many of us became aware of many things that we probably had ideas in our head, things that we thought, oh, it's just me. And it's not that I was necessarily into the concept of chastity. I didn't know what that was prior to kind of discovering it on Tumblr. Not only am I a switch, but I'm highly kinky. So for me, there's this kind of this exploration of, I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to try that. For me, a lot of it also gets into the mental aspects. There's physical challenge with a lot of kinks, and then there's also obviously the mental challenge. I first came across a couple of blogs online that were femdom cuckoldresses. This woman is so over the top. You probably wouldn't really want to know this person in real life because she is scary. But the stuff that she was doing to her husband, there was just no denying that it turned me on endlessly. She's out being like kind of the quote unquote hot wife and having sex with other guys. She'd lock her husband up and go out on trysts and maybe not even tell him. You know, we talk about ethical non-monogamy where you should be fully communicating with your partner. But you also, in kink, you also get into these concepts of sensual non-consent.
Right.
And so for me, that was a big part of it. The kinky side wants some more kind of novelty and more extreme sensation-seeking kind of elements. So when I came across this, I kind of brought it up to Red. She's not the kinky one in the relationship. I am. I am more the driver in this stuff. I ordered a chastity cage, one of those kind of clear plastic ones. And I quickly found that those aren't that great. The lady on this blog used this company. They're actually custom made chastity devices by a company called Mature Metal. I had this chastity cage and, there's like sizing rings. And so it's pretty specific to your own anatomy. I had this ordered. We kind of played with that and it was just fun. And she wouldn't tell me she might be going away on a business trip. And she'd say, I'm going to lock you up. That perspective I just loved, like that, the not knowing.
Right.
Subs are going to love that dynamic of being told what to do and being surprised with stuff. For me, that's kind of a big part of it. So we just started with, I would call it light chastity, being locked up for a couple of days. And really wasn't until I became more aware of this LOCKtober where it was like, okay, now that's a pretty serious challenge.
Right.
I'm really sexual. I mean, most guys are, but I can get off 3 or 4 times a day, like every day. So the thought of being locked up, your reaction to it would be like, no effing way. There was no way I could do that.
Right.
And I think that was also part of the appeal for me is this. I'm a person that I like challenge. I'm like, that seems really hard. I'd like to try that.
Yeah.
So it just kind of started like that. We got into it, and there was certainly challenges through it. A week into it, you really start to notice behavioral changes, meaning Red and I have a great relationship. We're attentive to each other, but you definitely notice, oh, she's in control. And so suddenly you'd find yourself doing more things for her. It's really hard to explain. You have to experience it. And I don't know if it is a chemical process that happens in the brain, or if it's just, well, this person's in control, so I better be on my best behavior. I can't really describe what that is, but there is 100% a mental aspect of it that kind of starts to take hold. After a few days, you might be like, oh, I really want to get off. But then after a week or so, I don't know how to explain it other than you get into it. You're like, oh, I can do this. Like anything else that you challenge yourself, whether it's fitness or any kind of other challenges in life, there's personalities that just gravitate towards that. So for me, it's a kind of an easy thing to jump into.
Interesting. So how did this initial conversation go with your wife?
And the way that I brought it up, we're new to the quote unquote lifestyle, right? A lot of the stuff that we do now was instigated by me, so to speak. I more have the wiring for it. This started about, good 10 years ago. So prior to the chastity, where I started to kind of express myself more sexually about certain desires. And a lot of stuff that I did that, most wives in a vanilla relationship be like, you want to do what?
Right. Right.
And so it was really those conversations and kind of almost, I'm going to call it coming out. If we're not homosexual, we can't really necessarily relate to what it's like to quote come out. But in my mind, these sexual things are like coming out.
Right.
And I hope that's not offensive to anybody, but there's things that you've bottled up that are part of you that you haven't shared with people that you then want to express with, a loved one.
Right. Someone you deeply trust. And
someone you deeply trust. And it was that time it was challenging, but I had a lot of these internal conversations and then finally said, okay, I'm going to have these conversations with her. So that kind of opened up the bag of kinks, so to speak. And it really wasn't until a few years later that I came across the chastity thing. And so by then, because our level of communication had increased and we were talking about different things and trying different things, it was kind of easy to have the conversation.
How does she like it? And was it a progression for her? Initially, was she just, let's try it. But then each year as it goes by, she was getting more and more into it. How did her experience change?
But she was, why would anybody want to do that? Was, of course, the kind of the reaction, right?
Yeah.
I did have a book that I read, Male Chastity, a Keyholder's Guide, was the title of it. A lot of things in there made sense to me and were intuitive. Like a lot of things, if you're challenged to express yourself a certain way, sometimes it's really easy to listen to something or read something that is the topic of what you're interested in and have your mate read that or listen to it with you. Then it makes it a lot easier to talk about. I'm sure a lot of your fans would acknowledge that with your podcast with like, hey, honey, let's listen to this Swinger University because you're talking about this thing that I find interesting. And then suddenly it's an easier conversation. The Tumblr blog, which I shared with Red, there's just a lot of stuff in there that gave us different ideas and so forth. And the book helped with kind of understanding. So she kind of was like, had some ahas. But again, if you're not a kinky person, it's going to be a progression, as you pointed out.
Right, right.
And I think over time, as we just did different things and you kind of, things become more quote unquote normalized, then it became easy. And then she kind of did lean into it and found it easier to kind of take a bit of a dom role, doing stuff that she wouldn't necessarily do.
What does she get out of it? Did she find or discover that it felt really good stepping into an area of control that maybe she had never felt before, or did it change her in some way?
I think it not as much changing her as developing a deeper understanding. I think that, it's not like she reveled in different things, but when she would see certain reactions, that would make her more interested.
Right.
So let's just jump into some of the things that we might have experienced where, and I don't know where this initiative, something that I brought up or it's just something that she did. And I don't know what the name for it is other than getting urinated on, getting pissed on.
Oh,
Right,
yeah. Piss
right.
play. Mm-hmm.
So pee play, like water sports.
Right,
And
right.
so one morning we get up and she tells me, go to the shower and sit down. And I'm like, huh, okay. So I go to the shower, sit down. She comes in she goes, do not turn the water on.
Oh.
So I sit down and I'm in the shower. Water's not on. She gets in with me and she proceeds to pee all over me.
Wow.
And if for those who are kind of into this stuff, like they will connect with this.
Right.
But that, like, there's certain things that can happen. And if you have submissive tendencies, as she starts to pee on me, I start going into subspace. And I don't know how to describe subspace other than, I don't know if it's a loss of mental capacity, but you're just like...
It's like a deep meditation.
Yes, you are going to a different place.
There are no words or thoughts. You're not thinking about the grocery list or anything in your head. You've just kind of zoned out.
Zone out. You can even, not hyperventilating, but almost like short of breath in the moment with something. Like you're so kind of excited by it, short of breath kind of a thing. That would happen. And then so the variety of things like that she would do when I was locked up. One time she unlocked me and then she gave me a ruined orgasm. I'm also dominant. Like I said, I'm a switch. So I enjoy doing that kind of stuff to her. Not that we do a lot of that kind of stuff. I love that position of power of like making her do something or doing something that's a little over the top or a little humiliating.
Right.
And I enjoy having that done to me also.
Right.
I think with chastity, she can't just lock you up and say, okay, you're locked up for the month. And then you're going about your daily business work and going to the grocery store. And like, that's going to get boring. You do have to have a partner who understands the dynamic and wants to kind of ratchet up the level of intensity of what you're experiencing for the period of time.
So let's talk about some of that stuff, because it sounds like we're moving into how it challenges you for that month.
The mental and that some of that physical.
Yeah. So what are some of those mental barriers or those things that kind of force you to consider your position and what's going on?
Well, it's really funny, but I can't remember if this is a couple of years ago now. I was pretty randy one morning. That very selfless act of like, okay, I'm not going to come, but we're having sex and I'm going to go down on her, give her orgasm. That's really fulfilling. And then just ending it with kind of spooning with her or whatever and falling asleep or whatever time of the day it is. I find that to be just extremely satisfying. So you can be giving and you're caged, so your dick is not a part of the conversation.
Right.
Right.
So it just becomes this power shift where your pleasure comes from pleasing the other partner.
That can also extend to just daily things like, you guys have been married for a long time, so you probably encounter situations where you're kind of stressed. You divide up your duties, like, okay, I'm going to do the X, Y, and Z. You're going to do A, B, and C, kind of divide and conquer. And we've all been there where something that you're responsible for is taking an inordinate amount of your time or whatever. And so you start to feel a little, maybe not resentful, but just like, God, I'm putting in a lot here. Mm-hmm. When you're in chastity, it's kind of weird that some of those elements just kind of go away. I don't know, again, what that is, other than it's got to be a chemical thing going on in the brain where you're just a little more open to taking care of certain things that maybe you normally wouldn't or she would take care of. You're just kind of a yes, ma'am. There's no argument. There's no discussion. It's like, of course, I'll take care of that. It's like an attitude adjustment almost.
Interesting.
Interesting.
I guess one of the other questions that I have is, have you had moments where you had to kind of will yourself through the process? In other words, mental challenges to kind of keep going or stay with it.
Yes. Kind of like I mentioned, for me, the only part where it can be challenging is if, you're caught up in daily life and, we're both professionals. She's pretty busy with the business that she does. She does a certain amount of travel. So if she's like all business, and I think guys are always thinking about sex. And I think when women are busy or tasked with things, it might be one of the last things on their mind. So certainly if you're not feeling sexual, you're not really thinking about, well, what do I need to be doing to torture my partner right now? That's chastity. So that is the challenge, is if days are going by, week goes by, and you're so ingrained in daily life, a big part of the whole chastity thing is the kind of the sub-dom aspects and the submissiveness. And so some of the things that we, again, being new to the lifestyle, I'm way more open to this than Red is, where I would love her to just like be out on a business trip and just like pick up some guy, have sex, like not tell me like a couple of weeks or a month later, like make it kind of intense, like a little more mean kind of, mean's not the right word.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I don't have a say in the matter.
Right.
And I think that is a part of the submissiveness, is you don't have a say in the matter. And I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Those elements, I would be like, oh, that hasn't happened. But that would be like an ultimate goal for me, is if something like that would keep me keenly focused on the chastity aspect. So that is probably the biggest thing, is if things are boring, then it's kind of like, this is just.
I'm thinking through this and kind of picturing it. And you have a daily reminder that there's something sexual going on, or completely non-sexual because you've been locked up, but it's there and it's tugging at your psyche, so to speak. And she doesn't have that. So in a sense, you've got this perpetual reminder of what's going on. And so she's kind of disconnected from that. A really big challenge for me is that it's almost like someone's tugging at teasing me all the time.
Yeah.
And it makes it almost omnipresent in your mind that something's going on.
Yes. And that's very true, because men's genitalia is on the outside. And so we're always aware of it.
Right.
And it's like, even from a young age, this reputation of like touching ourselves, whether it's baseball players or children or guys, or, we're always reaching down and grabbing. It's there. And it's like, look, if you had something hang between your legs, you'd grab it too.
Right.
So yeah, you're always aware of it. And then you add the weight. So the chastity cage that I'm wearing is, it's metal. It's like surgical steel. So it has more weight to it. So then, you're always like even more aware, because you can feel it. So it does kind of heighten, like you're saying, there's always that constant reminder, constant tease kind of going on. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Well, this is a good transition to kind of the next topic, which is some of the physical aspects of it. And it's interesting because you're talking about the weight, and I'm reminded of the Prince Albert jewelry. And with the large gauge ring that I have, when it's kind of just floating around, bobbing, like I really do feel the weight of it. It's there, and it's this constant reminder, or at least this occasional reminder of what's going on, but it's nowhere near as heavy as like a chastity cage. I mean, that's a lot more metal. Right. So let's talk about that for a second. You have a large metal cage wrapped around everything, your whole package. Is there any pain involved with that?
I have done this for a total of, since 2015, when we first started, I think it's been a total of 245 days.
Wow.
She locked me up yesterday, October 1st.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of assuming she's going to keep me locked for 31 days. But I don't know. It's not up to me. It's up to her. And the longest I've gone has been 35 days.
Wow.
It's kind of funny, because once you get towards the end, and I guys remember that episode of Seinfeld where they were in the rental car, and the rental car didn't have much gas left in it, and they kept driving, and they were seeing how far they could go before it eventually ran out of gas. That's what it's like. You're like, days are going by, and you're like, I could do this another day. I could do this one more day.
Right,
like you're just, it's a mental, totally this mental thing. There are things that you need to be careful of, every time you take a shower, paying attention to washing the cage, sticking your fingers into the crevices to kind of wash it and so forth. I use grapeseed oil. And this is a big thing. If you just put on the cage and you're wearing it for a period of time, you're definitely going to get chafing. It's going to be pulling. Certain types of clothing might be more uncomfortable.
Wow. Yeah.
Having some support is actually helpful. So you might think, it'd be just throw on a pair of shorts or something with no underwear. It's probably going to be more comfortable to put some underwear on, because it's going to hold the cage a little better. It's going to be more comfortable.
Right.
Everybody always talks about coconut oil, but to me, grapeseed oil is a better alternative for many things because it's less viscous. So doesn't have that greasy factor. It absorbs in your skin really easily. So it's a lighter thing. And it's, grapeseed oil is like any other oil. You can eat it, basically. So it's really safe for your body, for your skin.
Nice.
So you put that around the ring, the base ring that goes around both cock and balls. It's mostly your testicles, your scrotum that you want to have lubrication on because the skin can get chafed. The biggest thing is if you're getting an erection, people think of like having your dick in this cage is going to be uncomfortable. And that is not the uncomfortable part.
Interesting.
So having your penis get erect in the cage, you can see your penis is almost like bursting out of the cage. That is not, it's not that that's comfortable, but it's not the uncomfortable part. The uncomfortable part is that is a set size. And as your penis is growing, it's pushing the entire thing forward.
Right.
And so that base ring is behind your testicles. And so it's going to be putting pressure on kind of that around the perineum. So from the perineum to where your testicles are, that is going to get like stretched and that becomes painful, downright painful. So when you start getting an erection, you're like, okay, we need to stop this right now because that is sore. So I've done things as extreme as, and I like no doctor would recommend this, but I actually put on a numbing cream. When I did get like some soreness in that area, I used a numbing cream. A little tip here that some people may find disappointing, but the most that I've gone without having any relief, getting out of the chastity cage, has been probably about 2 to 3 weeks. And what becomes a problem, it's not the pain as much as the lack of sleep, because when you are getting nocturnal erections, which you cannot control.
Right.
There's nothing you can take. There's nothing you can do to change nocturnal erections. It's part of your body. And any healthy male should be having nocturnal erections. You are going to wake up with a raging heart on and you're going to, holy shit, my balls are on fire.
Wow.
Yeah, because if you lay in bed, like it could wake you up, but you might be that, how that sleepiness, like you just lay there, like you don't want to get out of bed because you're tired.
Right.
If you just lay there, that erection is not going to go away. And most guys know what I'm talking about. Sleepy penis, like you have a meal and you lay down, you sit down, slouch down on the sofa. Like that's a great time to get sleepy penis. And as long as you're in the position, you're going to have an erection. So you need to be like up. So that what I found was, okay, I got to go eventually you can go to the bathroom, right? Because you want to go pee. And you're going to have to stand, like literally stand up for 5 minutes until the erection goes down. But then it will get to the point where you go to bed and then it could be, 10 minutes later that maybe the erection comes back.
Wow.
So it really will impair your sleep. And that is probably the thing. It's like, well, you can't go that many days with having, your sleep disrupted.
Yeah.
So what you can do, and this is kind of the Scout Sauna thing, because there's no chastity cage is going to contain any cock. The penis is, so when it's completely flaccid, you can push the penis into the body.
Right.
Right. And so you can just push that in and it comes out the top of the base ring. Now the cage is still going to be locked on your testicles. So you can't get the cage off, but your penis is out. So then people would say, well, wait a second, then you're cheating. All I can say is whenever she puts me in that cage, there's no cheating going on. I am not going to masturbate regardless. And I never have. So it's very, very much a mental thing and a submissive thing. Like she told me to do this and I am doing it. I do find that like at night when you go to bed, you can do that little pull out and then you're not going to have the disruption of the sleep because there's really no way around the disruption of sleep.
Yeah.
But that thing is on there for 30 days, but there's a little workaround there. Now, for people who are really extreme, and I have one of these, but I haven't worn it for any real length of time, they have a sounding, like a catheter, 3 inches to 4 inches long that, goes right into the penis, down the urethra, and it screws onto the end of the chastity cage.
Wow.
So I think, then it would be really hard to pull your penis out of that.
Right.
But yeah, that one freaked me out. The sound, that's another topic, but the sounding, when we went to see a pro dom a few years ago and got into some ass play, and the pro dom pulled out these sounding things, and she was like, "Oh, and we can use these," and like covered her eyes, just like, "No." And I was like, "Well, I don't think I'm ready for that." But that did plant the seed in my mind. And so later on, being the kinky, perverted guy that I am, I'm like, "Huh, I wonder what that's all about. I want to try that." So I actually have tried the sounding, and so then this chastity cage has a urethral plug, I think is what they call it,
Right.
Wow.
on it. But I have not worn that long periods of time.
Fascinating. I'm so fascinated by this. Okay, so then you can take your penis out of the cage for some periods of time during the 30 days or whenever you want to, right? To give a little relief, but then you put it back in. That the sleep aspect makes sense. What about when you're showering? You don't really need to because you just are diligent when you're cleaning, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how is peeing through the cage? Is that messy?
I have no problem if your urethra, your pee hole, is not lined up with the opening in the cage. Obviously, it could be messy. It could splash.
Right.
After you have some experience with it, you get to know things pretty well, and you have to get a cage that fits appropriately. Can't be loose. Like I've seen, like in some of the social media, I've seen guys and it's like too loose. Like, no, it has to be relatively snug, like fit, and it'll stay in place better. And then I can actually pee standing up. But honestly, like at night when I go to the bathroom, I sit down anyway, because who wants to turn on a light in the middle of the night and look to see where they're peeing? You just sit down. So generally sitting down is a lot easier. I don't have any issues with that. There's no problem.
Nice.
Have you ever heard of any of the muscles being weakened or shrunk? There's some narrative out there that can happen, but can it really over a period of a few weeks?
I do think that you'll see, because if you're not getting sexual stimulation where you have a prolonged, erection, erectile tissue, the more that you use it, and especially if you edge and know how to really maximize your erectile tissue while you're having sex, that does keep that tissue kind of at its peak, so to speak, size-wise. I do think that you'll see, whatever you want to call it, shrinkage or whatever, but that's going to go as soon as you have sex. That's going to go away. There's nothing there that would be like, oh, you're permanently going to, be smaller or anything like that. Just like, no, that's not a thing.
Right. Fascinating. I'm so fascinated. I love knowing about all the kinks and all the things that everyone really enjoys for their own pleasure. We talked a little bit about the power dynamics. We talked a little bit about how this enhances, the sexual participation. Your focus gets changed 100% to Ms. Red, and so then she gets your full attention, and that in turn gives you pleasure. And are there other types of pleasure that you can participate in together while you're caged? Or are you just 100% off the table with all sexual activity?
No, not at all. Then you can get into pegging, right? So, and I love anal play. So that's something that we experienced with the Pro Dom some years ago. And I enjoy that very much. I enjoy doing it to her. I enjoy her doing it to me. When we do have an occasion, she does enjoy it because, at first I think a typical woman is going to respond to pegging like, why would I want to do that? What's in it for me? And then when they do it, then they hear the guy moaning and like, oh, that feels good, and all that reaction. And it's something they're doing, they're thrusting and that's happening. It's like, oh, that's a different experience. And so she does enjoy that. It's giving her, some power that's not typical for the female experience. And it's really enjoyable. And that is one of the things that I like, but that prostate orgasm while being penetrated has been elusive and I haven't experienced it yet.
Then when you're stimulating the prostate, you don't get an erection? And if you start to get one, does that basically just Do you have to stop because it starts pulling?
No, it's really hard to explain. It's like once you become versed with chastity, you can kind of where your body's at. So like when you're focusing on that, you're just going to focus on your ass. You're just going to focus on that area of your body. You're not going to focus on the penis, which is not natural for we're so males. We're so used to stimulating that part of our body and having that part of our body involved. But because you don't want to get an erection, you will get aroused. You're going to get some level of arousal and erection, but it's not going to be, it's not going to be the point of like, oh, I'm ready to penetrate.
Right.
It's not going to be that level of arousal. So, I think with prostate play, you're definitely there's going to be some level of arousal, but not like when, the male is doing the penetration.
Oh, okay. Okay. Because I was dying to know that part because I thought, God, how you're going, and then you're like, stop.
No, not quite. I should send you this link. So one of my favorite content creators is Venus Cuckoldress. I love her podcast. I listened to the one this past weekend, and she had a link in there to a talk that Dan Savage gave. It was a YouTube talk. Maybe you guys have seen it. It was 5 years ago. And it's phenomenal. It's on kind of our realm of sexuality and sex conversations. I don't know that there's anything specifically to say like to the community. The one thing that I would say is you guys know me pretty well, and I don't have it's not that I'm shameless, but I don't really have much in the way of shame. It's like I am who I am. I'm going to present that. I'm going to talk about the things I'm interested in. I have no shame around talking about, oh, I like getting fucked in the ass or, stuff like that. And I do think for men, so I identify as a cis hetero male. What do they call it? Heteroflexible. Mm-hmm. But then you get into these other elements of like, well, on the submissive side, well, what if Jen, tied me up and we're at a sex party and like whoever wanted to could fuck me. Right. Like I'd actually be down for that. Like I could do that. Right. So I think then you get in. So with a lot of things, so the only thing that, and it's not a hot button for me, but I do see this where men are really challenged to talk about certain sexual things because they think it might be perceived as gay or right. If a woman hears me saying this, I'm going to be judged, and I'm in the swinger community and I want to be having sex with women, so I don't want to be judged that way. And I do think that there's a lot of guys out there, like super masculine guys, that would be down for all kinds of things, but they will 100% are not going to admit that or talk about it because there's shame there or they're embarrassed about it. So I don't know that that's a topic to really conclude with. But, maybe there's a nice way of saying simply that, hey, if you're in the community and into this, like own it. It's like this is something that's really fun for you women out there who have partners that may be interested in it. Just listen with open ears and an open heart. If they have an interest, if your partner has an interest in stuff like this, because, as with partners, we owe that to each other, right? To listen and to be open. So, you might, on your sexual interest, you got the Venn diagram, you got that little bit of overlap where you're kind of exploring. And it's like, if you have a committed partner, you got to be interested in kind of pushing your boundaries so that you get a little more overlap on that Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're a switch, be proud of like exploring this stuff and don't let what other people think, stop you from exploration.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with LOCKtober and the challenges. And maybe some of our listeners will consider this as an opportunity to explore a little bit in areas that they'd never thought to try.
Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you joining our community. Don't forget your homework, tell a friend about our show, and leave a review and comment. You can also leave us a voicemail at 916-538-0482 or contact us at swingeruniversity.com. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep it kinky.